all the journalists know you. Not you. What's it? Non-linear or bilinear or whatever.
Okay, we're recording.
Okay, we've had our go at Mike, and we're ready to go. Dobbo, if we can start. Obviously, last week we back at training, and we heard from Doc Suter and Darby just on kind of the protocols at HPC and how training's running. Obviously, your involvement last week, sadly, your dad passed away, maybe a little bit limited, but you've now been back. Can you just talk about how everyone's adapted in the 2 weeks since it's been up and running, and how it's all been working, and if you've been happy with it?
Yeah, look, I think I'm thrilled. From protocol and compliance point of view, Clint Redhead from SA Rugby came down to us on I think it was Monday. It was Monday. So he gave us the thumbs up in terms of what we're doing in terms of compliance procedure. It is a curious environment for the players because there's just, the guys are just not interacting. The groups, the stacks are just crossing each other. They don't see each other. But in terms of the output and in terms of the compliance, it's going really, really well. I think the guys are just so relieved not to be running by themselves. So there's a joy. I said to Warwick Galant, it won't get any worse than this, So no, it's gone well. And I think also, as I said, I think our compliance procedures are really brilliant. I mean, I think our players are far safer there than they are in sort of day-to-day life outside of the HPC.
And then Dobbo, just in terms of the players are one thing, and we understand they're all excited to actually be back at HPC, but the coaching team as well. You guys are actually getting in a room together for the first time in a while. Being like that must have been incredibly positive and stimulating for you guys to actually get together and start planning properly.
Incredibly. I think we've done, I suppose a lot of you guys, even this course, so many Zooms and webinars and learned so much. I think if we'd held on, like I said, at the sort of, I think week 2 or 3 of lockdown, if we'd held on against the Sharks when we had the lead in 68th minute, we wouldn't have done anything like this level of introspection that we've done about our game. And so to be able to finally start implementing it is brilliant. It's brilliant. We've got so many nice plans about how we want to play, how we want to train, our culture. So now we can start getting it. I mean, it'd be nicer when we're in a bigger group, but it's really quite powerful to have meetings with guys of 4 or 5 and for the coaching group to meet itself. So yeah, I think we're in a very, very good, there's a very, very good energy. I'm very excited.
Cool. And then if you can just also, Dobby touched on the kind of red and blue groups last week. But if you can just explain how the players are being split and how that whole plan is kind of working.
So the whole squad's divided into a red and blue, and they, if you look at those teams when they're in full strength, they're 2 amazing teams. It's a good reflection on our depth. So there are about 20 guys in each, 22, or 20 guys who fit to train. They divide into 4 groups of 5, and then those groups of 5 then rotate between gym, field work, and skill work. So it works with coaches. Then they go on to some skill stuff into the gym. So that's the divided the day into 2. So those players of the red and blue never see each other, and then when they're in their 5s, they never sort of cross with each other. It is a challenge because it's limited to what you can do coaching wise in a group of 5, but we are finding innovative ways.
Great, guys. If we have any other questions, let's go for it.
Dobbo, have you guys got any more sort of information than we have on when you might actually be starting again? It seems a long way away still.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gav, and probably don't have any more information. And I think I think everybody's accepted that it's not some people that are behaving sinisterly. It's literally that nobody knows. So it's become, it was really, I used to ring up Jacques or Rusty and say, please, what's the info? But it's actually unfair because they everybody's sort of finding their way through this. My gut feel, and this is purely gut, Gavin, is that we were looking at end of August and there was the talk. I think that's back a couple of weeks now, just reality-wise. So if you are going to go, so let's say it is mid-September, and that's just my gut, and we're going to go double round 8 teams. I'll see you on Boxing Day. We will still be playing, but that's what it looks like. That's my feeling.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, on that though, I think it's a crazy idea personally, but the whole thing with the rugby championships, the Box going to the rugby championship, Jacques has said that if they do go to the rugby championship, It doesn't sound like he wants to, but if they do go to the rugby championship, they're going to take 45 players, around 45 players. That's going to hit you. I mean, if you're playing until Boxing Day, you're going to end up with having to call up the club resources or something, and they're not playing at the moment. So have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, we have. I suppose a big thing, Gavin, will be if the rugby championship, if we do go, I think you're right about the if we do go, and let's say, for example, some of that is outside the test window, then the numbers of guys coming from this union will probably be in the high teens, just by logic. So, and you're right, we can't call up a club. I mean, a poor club bloke hasn't played this year, not a game. So, obviously we were well blessed with depth with our under 21s and under 20s and stuff like that. I imagine it's a terrible balancing act, because you could have this fantastic Currie Cup and then it suddenly gets what's the word? Just gets stripped out. But we need the income from the international. So we have got. It might be great for us to blood guys. There's like young Lucids like Quenzo Blose and Leon Lyons, and Kitsi goes to rugby champ. It's a great opportunity for them. What that product looks like in South Africa, and to say I'm not something that I don't know.
Adobo, if nobody else is going to jump in here, there's another question I was going to ask you is obviously, like in your role, that you give a lot of thought to succession planning, and in a normal year you'd have guys who are coming through now through the age groups, and there must be guys who were supposed to be at the institute this year that aren't at the institute because it's just not happening, and those sort of things. How much of a problem is that? When I talk about succession planning, I'm talking about looking 2 years ahead and which 20-year-old is going to be ready. He's actually losing out on his development now because they're not playing this year, or maybe they are going to play on the 21 competition, but it's going to be very truncated. Have you given any thought to how you're going to go around that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the locus classicus would be Ricus Pretorius. We felt there's under 20 that Jamie Roberts, he could play. Jamie could play 3 or 4. Then we'd in game 7 or 8 we give Ricus a start or 2, bring him off the bench, and this is the future 12 of his next so-called young Surfington of South African rugby, which I think he can. Well, I don't want to pigeonhole him because he's a different player, but and now he's not going to. He's going to have 20 minutes against the Sharks, and that's his season. So that is that development of the next group, and that was a problem with the Stormers. We have got the Springbok heavy laden thing, and I think you saw the back end of that game against the Sharks when our sort of underexposed front row came on. We took a bit of heat, and they never made a sub, and this was meant to be about closing the gap, and in fact we were actually going to end up widening the gap, which is a threat. You're losing a year of guys. Because we don't ever want to Stormers go through. We can't be naive and think that Sia Khaleesi and Peter Steff and Kitsi and France are going to be with us forever. But we don't want to go through one of these. You've seen happen in other franchises, one of these horrible cleanups. We want to be seamless. You want a Jaco Kutsia ready to take over from Sia. You want a Choki coming through to take over, and we're losing a year of their development. So it is a source of concern for us.
Dobber, when we chatted to Yuri Rue, I think last week, you mentioned the possibility of playing in a bio bubble, and then the alternative is not playing in a bubble. But just what are your thoughts on maybe playing or getting all teams into one venue? Where do you think that would be best? I mean, I think Joburg was the initial thoughts, and maybe that's changing. I mean, I don't know even if the Cape is becoming increasingly an option.
I'd heard that talk about the Cape as well, and I heard one of the concerns about the Cape were the distractions. You know what I mean? The guys are it's true. The guys are going to be inclined to get out and mix a bit more than that's. I just heard that talk. I think mentally the bio bubble for such a long competition is really, really tough. If we're going to go up from mid-September until after Christmas, 3 months I think mentally, you're going to be asking a lot, and I know that's one of SARu's concerns is that the sort of mental toll on it. I mean, obviously, I don't want it to be in Loxton or Carnarvon because you want something to do. But I think our preferred thing is not a bio bubble, but we'll take anything. Is the absolute? I mean, we'll be anywhere that's required. I think it's just important that we play. But I think, as I say, if it was a 6-week thing, but a 3-month thing, that's going to be tough. Might suit me.
Yeah. On that, Dobbo, I've been watching quite a bit of cricket. I suppose lots of people have been. The bio bubble test in Manchester and Southampton the last couple of weeks, and it's like listening to the England players talk, and they haven't been in the bio bubble nearly as long as you're talking about. Listening to them talk, they couldn't wait to get out of the bio bubble for a week or two before Pakistan come. And as we know, Jofra Archer was sanctioned because he decided to just leave the bio bubble at some point on his own accord. I mean, that is. I mean, do you think it's even realistic to think of a bio bubble for 3 or 4 months?
You know, I don't. I'm desperate not to come across of any form of criticism because this is such uncharted territory. I know everybody's doing their best from SA Rugby, but I think it is. I really think it's going to be a tough ask. I mean, that Steve Harm, I think it was one of the cricketers. Who was it? It wasn't Harmison, but they're eating behind each other like you're writing an exam at school. You know, I mean, that to do that for 3 months, it's just. I think it is asking. I think then we'd have to question the validity. You know, what we're trying to do. Just I think, it's going to be tough.
Just in terms of the mental capacity that you talk of, how much of a focus has that really been for you guys as coaches towards the players, knowing that this is just uncharted territory, as you say, that the mental sort of capacity needs also be given more attention during this time?
Yeah, I think the initial concern was about that they weren't playing and they weren't doing what they're doing, and there's stress and anxiety and uncertainty. That's obviously flipped a little bit now with them back on the field. You can sense the joy and the upwelling and the excitement, and they haven't seen each other. I'm not too worried about that now. I think the danger would be, at some stage we're going to need some sort of, the Springboks are going to need to know if they're going, or we're going to need to know if we're in a bio bubble, and that anxiety, or when we actually start, and that's going to start sort of fraying at us now. So I think they're in a reasonable, as I say, there's a lot of joy of just getting back to what they're doing, that they can actually, that's taken a lot of pressure off. But now this whole debate of if, when, and how is starting to sort of grate. And I suppose also on the coaches, because how do you got a plan, and you don't know, it's just impossible. I mean, do we play a friendly? Do we play against, are we allowed to? Who could we possibly play against? And I think a good thing coming out of New Zealand this last week, and which was worrying our players, is the alarming injury rates, and we saw them in the Bundesliga because they were first back, they had a lot of injuries. And I mean, All Blacks, the All Black side is taking some shots. So there is still a sort of that, as we guys get over this sort of joy of training again, we're going to have to sort of start managing guys. There's going to be some stress. Yeah.
So there's obviously been all this talk about next year as well, and the changes, and Super Rugby being very different, New Zealand doing their own thing, if there's still travel restrictions, and I mean, there's lots still to play out there, but just what are your thoughts on all that talk, at least for 2021 being a very different sort of prospect?
Yeah, I mean, I've been having one-on-ones with the players over the last 3 days off the field, and they seem to be, including they seem to be quite split themselves, the players. Just out of interest, it's quite interesting. I think someone that said Super Rugby, it's wonderful. Speaking to a senior Springbok who I didn't really, I don't want to. He just said, that for too many years we've been chasing New Zealand, trying to play their rugby, and actually that Northern Hemisphere would fit us. There are another Bok told me, he likes playing against the New Zealand team because we know we're testing ourselves against the best. So I think there's a bit of, might be a bit of opportunism to use the travel things to throw the whole of Super Rugby out, being used by the, by New Zealand and Australia. But it is probably a reality for 2021. Personally, it'd be sad to see it go. I think our players like it. What worries me is if I'm very available to go north and make sense of all the arguments, Craig, but what happens to us in up until August or September next year, until we play until the Lions come? So is that going to be another domestic competition that we've just played this year? I think that's a big challenge for us, because I think then you're going to get into the area of player welfare. We've seen that maybe these intense domestic competitions, Australians think there's this intense, is fatiguing. So it's going to be a challenge. I think what we do, my main concern now would be, okay, so we play up until December, and let's say hypothetically we're going to pro, whatever it's going to be in August. What are we going to do up until the British Lions tour? Are we going to another domestic comp? And what, when that can start and what it looks like after we've just done the same thing this year. I think that could be a challenge for us, and how meaningful that competition is, because it's just filling time. So I don't mind. That's a far bigger decision, but it would just how we practically get there is the challenge.
Does it open up more? Sorry, Gav. I was going to say, does it open up more opportunities for those sort of like festival-friendly games, like the one that you guys have up with the Saracens for next year, and maybe just touch on that prospect, when it might take place, and the kind of thought behind going over there and playing a top England team?
I mean, there was sort of a joint initiative. We get on quite well with Saracens, and go and play at that stadium. We actually wanted to make a sort of mini tournament. Play 2 or 3 other. We've spoken to an Irish team and a French team. But there's just so much uncertainty around the dates. We couldn't pin down. There's no Six Nations window because we don't know it yet. And that game doesn't work unless Owen Farrell's playing or Mario Toja's playing. So there was no. So we actually short. I mean, we're grateful to have this game, and the date. All we know now is probably late January. I think it's a great idea. It depends what the seasons look like. If we had Stade Francais in Cape Town Stadium or at Newlands next year, that would be great. Because I think I worry about our domestic rugby economy and inventory if we're going to go 2 consecutive internal tournaments without much spice. So it's a good point. But I think just that it's impossible to pin down at the moment because of the dates. That makes it hard.
Donna, this might be debatable, but I've always felt that the and Eddie Jones actually said it the other day, that the coaching innovation every year sort of starts at Super Rugby and starts in New Zealand. Yeah. From a coaching point of view, I mean, if we sort of didn't have any provincial or regional sort of contact with New Zealand, wouldn't that hurt you in the sense that it takes away a bit of the challenge of keeping up to? I mean, I'm just using the Hurricanes as an example. When they started that press defense system a couple of years ago, it was almost like revolutionary in world rugby, and the rest of the world followed. Personally, I mean, as a coach, I mean, would you be happy to not be going to New Zealand at all, or would you feel that you're missing something in your coaching education if you don't?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the latter, Gavin, because they can punish you so hard so quickly. If you're not on top of your. So that is I would totally agree with that hypothesis. The Northern Hemisphere, you can grind it out. What they are, and you say all of us are probably following after New Zealand. I mean, so it's up to us as coaches to be disciplined, to learn from what. The change in the breakdown is staggering. What's happened in their domestic competition, and it's going to change how we train the breakdown. So you've got to be disciplined. If we're not playing them, we've got to be disciplined to try and learn, because they are ahead in terms of that stuff. But yeah, I think there's one thing about being disciplined watching video. There's another thing now. You've got to play the buggers on Saturday. So that would be it's probably an element of. It's probably an element that we could be missing out on if we're not part of that tournament, because I think you have to be at the sharp end of rugby the whole time. Probably the challenge for us is, and I say with one Springbok quote, is that we don't necessarily want to chase New Zealand's style of rugby, but we want to play them, if you know what I mean, with our style, and that's that is we'll miss out on that, because you can imagine what a South Africa, a northerner, or this time zone rugby would look like compared to that, and that the difference would be a concern. Yeah.
Because I mean, there was one year when Flecky was the there was one year when Flecky was the coach, when we had a conference system that saw the Stormers only play Australian teams, and we thought the Stormers were doing quite well, and then they ended up playing the Chiefs in the quarterfinal and took 60. And I mean, there's a very, I mean, international rugby is a completely different thing. But, that familiarity might be taken away from the Boks when they played in New Zealand as well. Obviously, vice versa too. But, I mean, that could also hurt the game.
Yeah, but you're right, Gavin. It tends to happen. I mean, it happens at international level. It happened at 2 Lions tours. And when the Lions have gone to New Zealand, suddenly when they're not quite on their game, they take 30 or 40 very quickly. It's Lions, so that can happen easily against, if an All Black or New Zealand provincial team hit their straps, it's unstoppable. So, it is a big risk. It would be a risk.
Sorry. Can I get a chance? How's it, Davo?
Are you?
Yeah. Great. Listen, just on I listen to all the chatter now about changes and all that. Just your thoughts on you see after every World Cup there are probably law changes proposed, and one of the law changes is now reducing the numbers of the replacements, probably from 8 to 6. And obviously we saw what happened in last year's World Cup. So just your thoughts on that, and how it impact on fatigue and injuries.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's broken like it. I don't think it's particularly broken like it is. I concern. I mean, you know, what I would worry about if we reduce the injuries, then we're going to become reduce the replacements. We're going to become just metronomes in terms of guys who can run, and that game then at the end becomes about just the guy. You know, so that, is there room for a certain type of prop in that game? If you know, and we lose the power stuff, and then we become a sort of basketball style of rugby where the team that runs the most runs away with the game in the last 10 or 15 minutes. You know, so I would say it doesn't necessarily, because you alluded, Nani, to the World Cup. It wouldn't necessarily suit South Africa that we did that, and I'm not sure. You know, you already see games that are 18-15 and on 65 minutes finishing 36-18 or 36-15. That'll become exasperated, and then if we're going to just be training guys to run, I think we'll lose some power, we'll lose some skill. You know, and rugby's always been about the balance. You know, that we can have a Frans Maherbe and a Sergio Peterson in the same team. You know, and that would be a concern for me. I don't think it's particularly broken. That South Africa took advantage of it to that effect last year doesn't mean I think we should really look at the whole game.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, guys, are there any other questions? Are we happy with that? Gavin, you got more?
Yeah, well, if there's nobody else is going to ask. Dobber, you know, we all talk about the negatives of, you obviously, like, you know, we're talking about this last couple of months as being like a sort of like an off season, but in reality, it hasn't been an off season. It's been longer than we normally have an off season. It's almost like going back to the days when I was the first rugby writer in Durban, and the guys would win the Currie Cup in October and then go and sit in the keg for 3 months. Because they had like a big, in fact, some guys played provincial cricket in the summer. So the negative is obviously that the guys' bodies have undergone, you know, it's a very different environment to where they normally come back, where they've just been out for a couple of months. But is there also maybe a positive in the sense that we've always sort of said there's too much rugby and too much sort of accumulated rugby. And if we don't get like overly physical when we first come back, maybe it's actually an advantage that the guys have actually had a rest. And they've had a rest where they're not in. I mean, some guys end up having a whole season of rest because they're injured, but that's a different thing. They actually have had a bit of a rest now, in the sense that they've taken a rest from the contact and the physical aspects of the game.
I think it's because we started doing musculoskeletal stuff about 2 months ago. So I think it's a massive opportunity. I think especially for the Springboks, for the Lions next year, because otherwise they risk going on an end of year tour, coming straight back into Super Rugby into the Lions. So I think the Springboks. I think Prof Noakes has even suggested it, that the Springboks who've been through, they played the World Cup, they drank for a month, and then they went to Super. So I think it's a massive thing for us, a massive boost for us at international level. The challenge, Gavin's going to come in what happens. Let's say we are playing, whether it's Rugby Championship or Currie Cup, up until December, when they get us back on the field again, because there's going to be commercial imperatives to get us back on as soon as possible, and that could undo some of what you're saying is the good of this. You know, if we could still have the normal pre-season, I think we'd be in a fantastic position with our players. But I suspect that might be wishful thinking, that we're going to get a proper off-season. You're right. I mean, what's it normally? Normally we finish the traditional, excluding the Springboks, they finish end of October, the old Currie Cup, and start 6 weeks before they start Super Rugby prep. A normal player. Now we've got 4 months. So it is extraordinary.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Dobbo. And thanks everyone for your time today. We'll send the recording out as usual, and then we'll let you know what's happening next week as well. All right, guys.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks, chaps.
Thank you.